Putin he's basically has been opening the equivalent of youth centres. These were just around Moscow, but it's part of a kind of national campaign to sort of open youth centres, and it's all about schooling the Russian youth in what Putin describes as traditional values of sort of family, religion, these sorts of themes. And while he was there, while he was doing this, he suddenly kind of launched into this biblical quotation where he appeared to suggest that he was a Christ-like figure himself. And the specific passage of the Bible he's talked about was where Jesus goes to the Sea of Galilee and meets two fishermen, and eventually sort of says, well, I can teach you to fish for humans, to fish for, to become, to spread the word of God, to evangelize. And Putin was basically suggesting that, like Jesus himself, by opening these youth centers and, spreading the message about traditional values, he was doing a similar work to Jesus in terms of teaching a new generation to pass on the good word of Mr. Putin.
Yeah, but it sounds, George, like, I don't know, self-promotion, political self-promotion, straying into the territory of delusions of grandeur. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago, remember Donald Trump, he published a picture of himself in a courtroom dock, and in that sort of courtroom drawing, there was the figure of Jesus Christ. It is pushing the boundaries, to put it mildly, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of 4 years when Medvedev was president of Russia, he has been in control for 24 years. So by that point, you become pretty accustomed to what you say goes. It is pretty delusional, but also, the Russian Orthodox Church and Christianity under Putin's rule has played a useful role for him in bulwarking his status and also, spreading pro-Kremlin messages. He's been, the war in Ukraine has been fully supported by the Moscow Patriarchate, which is the kind of head of the Orthodox Church. So, it's useful for him as well as being delusional, as we might say it.
Yeah, well, I guess whereas Donald Trump invited and got a good deal of mockery for that representation of Jesus alongside himself, you're not going to get mockery of that kind in Russia, are you?
No, well, I mean, you might get it, online in memes and stuff, but it's not going to be open. I don't think, if he walked on water, I think most people in Russia would be fearful of contradicting that if it appeared on state TV rather than saying this is completely ridiculous. So, this is a man who is in total control of the narrative, and that means that in a meeting where he's talking about opening youth centres, he can suddenly meander off for several minutes and quote the Bible and start comparing himself to the Messiah.
Make it almost sound normal. George, lovely to talk to you. Thank you. George Grylls there, the Times defence and political correspondent. So you write in your column about Russia and how Russian athletes should not be competing in the Olympics under any flag. Tell us about your piece.
Well, it's prompted by the fact that the sports minister, Stuart Andrew, has made a U-turn and decided that Britain will back the International Olympic Committee, which says as long as there's a tightening of neutrality rules, that it's okay for Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete at the Games. The tightening of the rules is not a big deal, I don't think. I mean, it's pretty similar to what we would have expected. They're not allowed to wave the flag. They have to wear a neutral kit. They can't in any way have ever. They do a vetting process, so they check that any athlete allowed into the Games has never publicly backed the war in Ukraine. And I have every sympathy for, at an individual level, for athletes to want to do what they spent their whole life training for. But this seems to me to be a really quite ludicrous decision, and I don't think it'll be a terribly popular one, because it's fooling nobody, John. When you watch tennis, which is the prime example, I think, and you see a famous tennis player and it has next to their name a gap where the flag of their country should be, no one's fooled. Everyone knows what the flag should say. It should say that they're from Russia or Belarus. We all know that. And just having a blank on the screen doesn't stop us recognising the athlete as representing Russia, as having lived in Russia. And although many tennis players will say when pushed, I mean, they'd rather say nothing, but when they're pushed, they will say things like, oh, I want peace, and so on. But it's not, and it would be very difficult for them to actually, slate Putin. We all understand that. But it is, I suppose the ultimate point of my piece is, what will Vladimir Putin think? And I think he will think, golly, Russian athletes are just so superior and so compelling that they are allowed at the Olympic Games even when there's an illegal invasion.
Yes.
Because that's when it's one thing to say, well, we don't want war. We say this war is illegal, but we are allowing Russian athletes to compete on the world stage.
Right.
And effectively, they are representing Russia.
Yeah, so your argument is that this is an expulsion of Russia just in name only and not in any meaningful way. Why, Alison, do the Olympic authorities, accommodate the Russian team in this way?
Well, they would say that they're not accommodating the team. I mean, the word team is very important, and teams are not generally in sport, universally, Russian teams are not allowed to compete. So UEFA doesn't allow the best Russian football clubs to compete in European competition. But even there's a relaxation of approach. They have just lifted that ban when it comes to under 17 teams from Russia. And the logic there is, why should children be punished for the sins of their fathers? Why should children not be allowed to play football on the international stage? You're wrecking the potential for a complete career. And I think the feeling goes with Olympic individuals that the punishment is too big for one person to bear on their shoulders. That individual has not been thinking about Ukraine and the politics. All they've been thinking about is the shot put or their ability to run quickly. And it's too much to say that that single individual who has never publicly backed the war should never be allowed to compete again.
In a nutshell, Alison, is your feeling shared widely inside the world of Olympic sport?
No, Britain in a way is coming into alignment with countries like the US who believe the sanctions are sufficient. Rather than a blanket ban, they think there should be this way in for them. As long as the Russian flag can't be seen, basically most governments seem to be comfortable with that. But what I do believe is that most people who love sport and have seen what's unfolded in Ukraine are uncomfortable about that leeway.
Yeah. Well, Alison, thank you so much. That's Alison Rudd with a look ahead to her column in the Times digital edition now.